For many years, the home of Rob Reiner and Michelle was admired as a symbol of stability and unity in Hollywood. Four children growing up together in Brentwood, shared meals, familiar routines, and moments that reflected a close family bond. From the outside, their life appeared calm, loving, and carefully balanced. Everything shifted on December 14th, when unexpected events inside the household drew widespread attention. And please hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot to me. What followed left many people confused and searching for clarity. As authorities began reviewing the situation and their son Nick became part of that process, the public believed answers would come quickly. Instead, new voices and emotions entered the conversation. Not long after, Tracy Reiner, Rob's adopted daughter, whom he openly embraced as his own, shared deeply personal reflections that changed how many people viewed the family dynamic. She spoke about an unfinished will, unspoken thoughts, and conversations that never reached closure. She described emotional struggles that had been kept private behind the family's calm image. "If Dad had just one more day," Tracy shared emotionally, "maybe things wouldn't have reached this point." As people tried to understand her perspective, another family member stepped forward with a different view. Rob and Michelle's biological daughter offered her own interpretation, adding complexity to the discussion. According to her, long-standing family tensions may have existed, including feelings about unequal treatment among the children. That statement immediately sparked debate and renewed public interest. Rob Reiner was widely respected not only for his career as a director, but also for his dedication as a parent. Despite a demanding professional life, he consistently prioritized being present, supportive, and engaged with his children. Tracy, whom he adopted from his first marriage, along with Jake, Nick, and Romy, the children he shared with Michelle, were all raised within that commitment. His care wasn't shown through grand gestures, but through steady, everyday involvement. From childhood into adulthood, his role remained constant and intentional. "You children are my whole world," he once said, a statement that reflected his values clearly. He told Tracy directly, in a sincere and steady voice, "I will always be by your side no matter what happens." With her especially, Rob showed consistency, respect, and inclusion, never drawing lines between adoption and biology. He listened closely, offered reassurance, and shared simple, meaningful moments. Quiet evenings that held lasting emotional meaning. Rob would often sit beside Tracy, talking with her about work, life, and everything in between. He made it clear that no matter how tough things got, she would never be alone. "I know you're strong enough to handle things," he once told her, "but I'll always be here when you need me." Those words gave Tracy a deep sense of safety, trust, and steady love that stayed with her. With Jake, the oldest son, Rob connected through shared passions, especially baseball. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a family tradition passed down from Carl Reiner to Rob, and then from Rob to Jake. That love for the game came with patience, laughter, and real bonding. Father and son traveled together to Major League Baseball stadiums across the country, turning each trip into something unforgettable. Those journeys weren't just about the sport. Rob once explained that baseball gave him a way to get closer to Jake, teaching values, sharing quiet moments, and building trust without pressure. Over time, those trips became memories that mattered more than the scoreboards, moments where love showed up through small, meaningful actions. Rob would often smile at Jake and say, "You know, sometimes I learn a lot from you." That mutual respect built a connection that felt natural and lasting. Those were the kinds of moments that don't fade easily. Romy, the youngest daughter, held a special place as well. She received constant care, close attention, and genuine listening from both parents. Rob made time to hear her worries, her dreams, and even her frustrations, making sure she always felt supported. "I'll always be here, Romy," he once said softly, "no matter where you go or what you do." His steady presence and warm hugs became a source of comfort throughout her early years. With Nick, though, the relationship followed a very different path. It was more complicated, marked by emotional distance and constant concern. Rob's care for Nick came with patience and worry, like a father stuck between hope and uncertainty. Nick's path didn't follow the steady rhythm of his siblings. Instead of smooth progress, there were repeated challenges that kept Rob constantly alert. From a young age, there was a gap between them that was hard to explain. They struggled to share interests, and finding common ground didn't come easily. Rob leaned on structure, routine, and familiar values, while Nick showed signs of pushing against limits early on. There were nights in the Brentwood house when Rob sat quietly, waiting, watching the clock move slowly forward. In those moments, he questioned himself again and again, wondering where he could have done better, carrying the weight of responsibility every parent feels when answers don't come easy. When Nick was around 15, serious struggles began to enter his life, gradually pulling him into a difficult cycle that became hard to escape. It started with substance issues and quickly turned into a long, exhausting battle that affected the entire family. Rob and Michelle found themselves watching their son move in and out of treatment programs many times, facing long stretches of instability that left everyone emotionally drained. Nick drifted between different states, often without a stable place to stay, and each setback weighed heavily on his parents. For Rob, every phone call and every stretch of silence brought crushing worry and constant fear, paired with a deep sense of helplessness. He felt trapped, trying everything he could to guide his son back to steadier ground, yet never knowing which step was right. At one point, Rob chose what he believed was tough love, following professional advice that urged firm boundaries. He pushed Nick into treatment against his wishes and cut off financial support, hoping it would force change. Years later, Rob openly admitted this choice haunted him. "We trusted people with degrees hanging all over their walls more than we trusted our own son," he confessed. That statement carried the heavy regret of a father who felt he had made things worse without realizing it. As time passed, the distance between father and son grew. Their relationship became strained, filled with arguments, long silences, and unresolved emotions. There were years when Nick chose not to return home at all, while Rob and Michelle lived in constant worry, unsure where their son was or how he was coping. That emotional gap widened slowly, making reconnection feel harder and harder. Then, in 2015, a small breakthrough appeared. The film Being Charlie brought Rob and Nick together professionally, Rob as director, Nick as co-writer. The story drew from Nick's own experiences, forcing both of them to face painful truths head-on. The process wasn't smooth. Rob later admitted there were intense moments, heated debates, and raised voices. "We were yelling at each other at times," he said, "but for the first time, we were also really listening." Those difficult conversations opened doors that had been closed for years. Nick later shared that working on the film changed a lot between them. Their bond improved, and some wounds began to heal, even if the tension never fully disappeared. Nick experienced periods of stability and lived for a time in the guest house on his parents' property, trying to rebuild structure in his life. Still, underlying struggles remained. Michelle privately shared with friends that the family had tried everything they could think of, but the emotional toll was becoming overwhelming. Just one day before a highly public holiday gathering on December 13, 2025, what should have been a warm, cheerful evening carried an unspoken tension beneath the lights and laughter, a quiet signal that unresolved issues were still lingering. Rob Reiner arrived at the gathering with Nick by his side, but the tension between them was impossible to hide. Even among a room full of guests, their strained dynamic stood out immediately. Rob raised his voice, confronting his son over choices he clearly could no longer accept, his tone heavy with frustration and emotional exhaustion. Conversations around them faded as people sensed something serious unfolding. Nick fired back, visibly overwhelmed, his words scattered and charged with years of built-up hurt. This wasn't a normal disagreement. It was the release of long-buried emotions that had never truly been addressed. The moment reflected a relationship caught in a constant tug-of-war between care and conflict. Then Rob said a single sentence that stopped everything cold. "I can't keep protecting you if you continue to live like this," he said before turning away and leaving Nick standing alone in the middle of the room. Several people later said that moment felt heavy, like something had finally cracked after years of strain. By the end of the night, any chance at calm conversation had vanished. What should have been a season of connection ended instead with silence and distant looks that said more than words ever could. The following day, December 14th, events inside the Brentwood home drew immediate attention from authorities and shocked everyone who knew the family. News spread quickly, leaving Hollywood stunned that a family long seen as close and loving was now at the center of such a serious situation. Early reports indicated that Nick Reiner became a central focus of the investigation, with officials noting concerns about his emotional state and long-standing personal struggles. According to official statements, a sudden loss of control led to a confrontation inside the home that escalated rapidly. What followed happened within minutes, leaving the household in complete disarray and drawing emergency response shortly afterward. Investigators described the situation as fast-moving and deeply distressing. Romy Reiner, the youngest daughter, returned home later that afternoon and immediately contacted authorities after realizing something was wrong. Law enforcement responded quickly and began securing the area while piecing together what had occurred. Nick left the location shortly after, but was located and taken into custody within hours near the University of Southern California. Officials confirmed he was being held without bail as the legal process moved forward, while the investigation continued to unfold. The entire situation left many struggling to understand how years of unresolved tension, emotional distance, and unanswered questions could reach such a devastating breaking point. What once appeared to be a stable family story was now being re-examined through a far more complicated and painful lens. As the case continues under close review, officials have shared that evidence from the scene aligns with what was recovered inside the home, helping investigators piece together the sequence of events. Even without final conclusions, the situation has already been described as one of the most heartbreaking family breakdowns imaginable, marking the painful end of a long struggle tied to personal challenges that had followed the family for years. When Nick was taken into custody, the atmosphere surrounding the case grew even heavier. The public response wasn't just about shock. It was filled with sorrow and disbelief that unresolved family pain may have played such a central role. Many were left wondering how love, effort, and years of trying to help could still lead to such an outcome. If the allegations are ultimately confirmed, it would represent the most devastating possible conclusion to a father and son relationship that once carried so much hope. A bond built on care and belief slowly unraveled, leaving behind questions that may never fully be answered. As the holiday season quietly passed, the image that remained was deeply unsettling: a family forever changed, a relationship broken beyond repair, and a future filled with uncertainty. Yet for many, the most emotional moment came when Tracy Reiner finally spoke publicly. Her words stopped people cold because her account didn't match the assumptions many had made. In the days after Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner were gone, while Hollywood was still struggling to process the news, Tracy was the first family member to break the silence. Her voice shook as she spoke, as if each sentence carried an unbearable weight. Tracy shared that everything happened far too quickly, leaving no time for anyone to prepare emotionally. Just days earlier, she had seen her father, heard his laughter, and spoken with him about ordinary, everyday moments. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. There were no warning signs, Tracy said, her voice breaking. I had just seen my dad last week. That single sentence hit hard, making the reality feel even more difficult to accept. In a brief exchange with NBC News, Tracy struggled to contain the shock she was experiencing. I come from the most wonderful family, she said, barely holding herself together. I don't even know what to say. I'm still in shock. Her words weren't meant for attention. They were the raw reaction of someone whose sense of safety had been shattered overnight. Tracy went on to describe Rob and Michelle as parents who put love, guidance, and presence above everything else. Rob, despite the demands of a career filled with major films, always placed family first. He taught his children about honesty, about caring for others, and about finding the strength to keep going after life's hardest moments. Those lessons, Tracy said, were the foundation of everything he believed in, and the part of him she hopes the world will never forget. Michelle, with the gentle spirit of a photographer and producer, was always the quiet presence holding everything together. She listened more than she spoke, offering steady warmth and calm support to every member of the family. Together, Rob and Michelle created a home filled with laughter and care, even while facing challenges that tested them in ways few could see. During the interview, the moment that affected Tracy the most was speaking about Nick. She made it clear that her parents loved him deeply, perhaps even with more concern and emotional weight than anyone else. Rob and Michelle always viewed Nick as the most fragile of their children, the one who needed extra patience, extra protection, and endless compassion. They always told me how much they loved Nick, Tracy shared. She recalled how worried they were about him, even when circumstances became overwhelming. When Rob and Michelle spoke about Nick, their eyes carried both sadness and hope at the same time. They understood that he had faced struggles his siblings never experienced, and that those challenges had taken away years of peace and stability. Because of that understanding, Tracy revealed that her parents made a quiet decision in their will. They left Nick a larger portion of their assets, not out of favoritism, but as a final expression of care. To Tracy, it felt like a message that said, "You are still our son, no matter what." One evening, Tracy found herself alone in Rob's study, the room he cherished most. The old wooden desk was covered with unfinished scripts and worn-down pencils, just as he always left it. That's when she noticed a plain brown notebook with no name on the cover. It looked untouched, almost like it had been waiting for the right moment. Tracy hesitated, her heart pounding, before slowly opening it. From the very first page, she understood she had stepped into the most private part of her father's inner world. These weren't work notes. They were personal reflections, written in a way she had never seen before. Rob wrote about Nick, his handwriting shakier than usual. He questioned his own choices, admitting regret over keeping too much distance during Nick's time in treatment. He had believed strict boundaries would help, but now he wasn't so sure. "Perhaps I was wrong," he wrote. "Maybe what he needed wasn't discipline, but someone sitting beside him, even in silence." Tracy read those words with trembling hands, tears quietly soaking into the pages. As she kept reading, Rob wrote about the deep helplessness of watching his child struggle while feeling unable to ease that burden. His words were raw and unfiltered, filled with honesty rather than polish. "There is no pain like seeing your child struggle," he wrote, "and not being able to carry that weight for them." One passage stopped Tracy completely. She couldn't continue right away. Some emotions, even written down, were almost too heavy to face all at once. In the notebook's final pages, Rob admitted something he had never said aloud. He was afraid. afraid that Nick might believe he had been left behind emotionally. "If you ever think your father doesn't love you, that is my fault," he wrote. "I love you so much that I don't even know how to love you the right way." Reading that, Tracy sank into the chair, pressing the notebook to her chest, finally understanding that her father's silence was never coldness. It was fear he never knew how to voice. Even among all that regret, there was still a fragile sense of hope. Rob wrote that he never dreamed of Nick becoming famous or wildly successful. All he wanted was for his son to live a steady, peaceful life. "If you can wake up each morning without hating yourself," he wrote, "that alone would be enough for me." Those words hit Tracy hard because they were thoughts her father never managed to say directly to Nick. As she read, Tracy couldn't hold back her tears. She remembered the times Nick accused their parents of not understanding him, of emotionally stepping away when he needed them most. In the past, she had argued back, frustrated and hurt by those accusations. But now, holding the notebook, she saw something far deeper, a quiet heartbreak built on love that never found the right words. It wasn't a lack of care. It was two generations loving each other fully, yet never learning how to truly reach one another. On the final pages, Rob wrote, "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." It read like a confession meant to heal, yet never spoken aloud. Tracy closed the notebook slowly, almost carefully, as if even moving too fast might disturb the feelings inside it. Standing alone in the room, she whispered softly, "Dad loved Nick so much. They just didn't know how to say it to each other." Her words faded into the quiet, but it felt like the room itself was listening. According to Tracy, the deepest sadness wasn't about effort or sacrifice. It was about misunderstanding. "They loved Nick so much," she said, her voice shaking as she paused to gather herself. "But maybe Nick never felt that love in the way they hoped he would." There was no blame in her words, no judgment, only sorrow for chances that quietly slipped away. She explained that for many years, Nick often blamed their parents for not understanding him, for not being present in the way he needed. Sometimes those feelings burst out in frustration, other times they lingered quietly, building distance over time. That emotional gap grew slowly, unnamed and unresolved, until it became something no one knew how to close. What remained wasn't anger. It was the painful reality that love alone isn't always enough when people don't share the same emotional language. Tracy explained that her parents loved Nick deeply, but they loved him in the only way they knew how. While Nick waited for something different, a stronger presence, a hug, a single sentence spoken at the right moment, neither side ever managed to reach that point in time. She clearly remembered moments when arguments ended in silence, not because they didn't care, but because words felt powerless once emotions ran too high. They never stopped loving Nick, not for a single moment. But that love was always mixed with confusion and fear. Fear that saying too much might push him further away instead of pulling him closer. "They were in so much pain," Tracy said quietly, "but they never stopped hoping that one day Nick would understand." In her eyes, Rob and Michelle weren't just parents. They were human beings doing their best, even when the cost was emotionally overwhelming. "My dad wasn't perfect," Tracy said softly, "but he loved his children with everything he had." It was that truth, she explained, that made everything feel heavier than words could carry. As Tracy shared her thoughts, the closest members of the Reiner family released a brief public statement through the youngest daughter, Romy Reiner. The message, sent to Variety, was short but deeply emotional. "We are deeply devastated by this sudden loss and ask for privacy during this incredibly difficult time." Just a few lines, yet they reflected an immense wave of grief from children facing an unimaginable change in their lives. Romy Reiner, 28, a young woman building a career in acting and screenwriting, lived nearby and often visited her parents. She stopped by to talk, to share everyday moments, and to spend time with the two people she always described as her greatest inspirations. No one could have imagined that what felt like a normal visit would become the most painful moment of her life. When Romy stepped into the familiar Brentwood home, she immediately realized something was terribly wrong. No child should ever have to experience such a moment inside a place that once felt safe and warm. She was frozen with shock, unable to speak, her body trembling as her thoughts seemed to disappear all at once. According to people close to the family, Romy sat silently in the house, overwhelmed, tears falling without sound, as if even making noise felt impossible in that moment. The emotional impact of that day left a deep mark on her. Just hours earlier, her parents had been there. Rob with his familiar warmth, Michelle with her gentle presence. Now, she was left trying to process a reality that no one could ever be prepared for. What remained was a quiet, overwhelming absence, and a memory that would stay with her long after the house fell silent. Mental health experts explain that an emotional shock of this scale can deeply affect someone's sense of safety and balance, often bringing lingering stress, confusion, or emotional numbness. No matter how strong Romy may appear, she is still a young woman facing an overwhelming moment in her life, one that no one is ever truly prepared for. In the days that followed, the family came together, Jake, Tracy, and their closest loved ones, surrounding Romy with care and support. Everyone understands that healing from something like this takes time, patience, and compassion, and that some feelings may take years to fully settle. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Goldenscape channel for more powerful human stories told with care and respect.